Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at thedove.us.
Well, welcome back to Focus Today. In this segment, we have a fascinating discussion that is of serious importance as we're hearing more about people who come back and have post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of their military service. Sometimes, I'm amazed at how many times some of these individuals have had to go back into combat time and time again, multiple times. I don't think we've seen that in wars until recently, the past few years. Dennis Davis is with us. He's a producer and director of a film called An Epidemic of Distortions, and it has to do with the stories you may have heard and some you may not have heard about those who are surviving and suffering from PTSD. Dennis, I appreciate you being with us. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Give us an overview, without me asking too many questions about what this film is about. What was your desire when you were coming together with the ideas for this? What is it you wanted to actually film?
Well, very simply put, we want to tell the positive stories of veterans who have survived but also thrived despite and oftentimes because of their PTSD. We hear the negative stories all too often in the media and the movies, and they portray many misconceptions, distorted views on post-traumatic stress, like we're ticking time bombs, we're violent, we're not capable of success beyond the military, we're broken and need to be fixed, and all of those just really aren't true for the most part, and we wanted to bring some positive stories, and we feel that the world needs that, the country needs that, and the veterans certainly need that.
You know, I think that when we hear of somebody who says, you know, I'm a military veteran and I suffer from PTSD, all of a sudden people are saying, okay, how do I treat this person so that they don't, like you're saying, flip out? That would be the idea that we're having. With that kind of a misconception, what does a public need to know on how to react to that kind of a statement when somebody says, I have this problem?
Well, you know, PTSD it's post-traumatic stress, PTSD. It's not PMSD, post-military stress. It is caused by trauma. So anybody can have post-traumatic stress. You could be in a car accident. Anybody that I come into contact with, you come into contact with, could be a victim of assault or a crime, have lost a loved one in a very tragic situation. So those are all things that can lead to PTSD. The military is good at causing trauma in certain missions, but it is not the driving force behind PTSD. So I think the first thing is to realize that this could just as easily be my next door neighbor who was in a bad car accident last month and suffers from PTSD as it would be a military person. And the second thing is understand that, you know, if they're willing to talk about it, they're probably doing really well and probably have handled it in a way that's allowing them to go on to be successful and probably driving them to be successful in many respects.
What is the current methodology for those who have been diagnosed that way? How does our medical community treat them, and do they do so successfully?
You know, I can only speak not as a medical professional, but from my own experiences and my first counseling experience. I called into a line that was available to military personnel and was scheduled with an appointment, I believe, the next day. And the counselor decided not to show up. They had an administrative error, not really the greatest thing to do early in the morning with a semi-suicidal person, not show up for the appointment. And then 2 appointments in, really had a hard time. The counselor had a hard time with what I was describing, and the challenge was they weren't there, and yet they're having a hard time with it. Imagine how I feel because I was there, and those tapes are constantly replayed in my mind. So I found another counselor through the same resource and ended up being Christian. We were of like faith and really helped me process the changes in my life. So the opportunities are out there, finding the right person, whether it's faith-based or not, to be able to understand that this is the way God created us. Our brains are beautifully and wonderfully made, and that this is how we process trauma. And to know that it's not happening again, we can work through it and not avoid triggers, but understand how to deal with them so that we can live a normal and healthy life.
Well, from your experience, and it sounds like, I mean, like in any profession, there's going to be individuals who kind of succeed better at their profession than others, and for those medical personnel the same way. How does one know how you're going to get a good doctor or a medical team to work with somebody with PTSD? Since, like you say, it's kind of a critical thing. If you're suicidal, you want to get that, how would I say, under some sort of treatment as soon as possible. How do you find the right person?
You know, that was just a blessing from God for me. I would encourage people, you know, specifically if they're looking for a mental health provider, somebody that has dealt with trauma and PTSD and or PTSD. A lot of places in the country, you're not going to have a lot of veterans in the area, so they may not have a lot of experience dealing with military, but somebody that has dealt with trauma with first responders, the type of trauma that we may deal with in the military, and is familiar with that, then their counseling methods are going to be such that they're used to dealing with that and understanding that. Somebody that's dealing with other family issues, divorce issues, relationship issues, I don't know that they're equipped cognitively to be able to deal with it, but you know, mentally and emotionally, it's a lot when you kind of dump, this is what I'm going through on somebody's lap. So I think finding somebody that has experience dealing with trauma is the first step in probably finding somebody that can help you.
Okay, Dennis Davis is our guest. He's a producer and director of a film called An Epidemic of Distortions. I'd like you to talk a little bit more about the distortions. You've kind of touched on it a little bit. What are the other things that are distorted about what PTSD is all about, and how to be a friend to somebody who's got the problem and work with them?
Well, I think that many of the distorted views, and I've seen them on the other side of the hiring desk in my private sector career, but that military causes it, that all veterans have it, because you wore the uniform you have it, because you deployed you have it, that we're broken, that we need to be fixed, that we can't achieve success outside of the military or beyond the military, again, because we're broken. And those are most of the stereotypes and distorted views that just aren't true. And then the other one, that we are violent. You know, we're not violent. The statistics prove that when we're violent, we're typically violent towards ourselves, and that bears out in the suicide rate of 22 veterans a day committing suicide.
Wow.
You know, what I would say for people that are in touch with a veteran or anybody that has post-traumatic stress is just being sensitive to how they respond to things. Everybody has different triggers. If it's a veteran and it's combat related, mine is not directly combat related, but if it was combat related, you know, being sensitive to even things like, you know, 4th of July. There are many veterans that they love 4th of July, but they have a lot of trouble with the fireworks if they're combat related. So things like that just being sensitive and not poking fun at, well, why can't you go to fireworks? What, are you scared? You've been to Iraq, you can't go to fireworks? Well, there's triggers there that affect them negatively, and so whatever those triggers are, they may seem silly and trivial to you, but they're probably a big deal to that person. So being able to be sensitive and help them through those things, and that is, I think, probably the best thing, is just being supportive and being a friend and understanding that they're forever changed. They're not broken. They don't need to be fixed, but they are changed, and they are going to live a different life, and that's okay.
Well, let me ask you, is PTSD a problem that some people can hide, or is it very hard to hide that? Have you known vets who might have been able to do that successfully?
I believe typically that people that have PTSD don't always understand it at first. I know I didn't understand it for 3 or 4 years.
Wow, really?
You tend to self-medicate. You know, why is this happening? I can't sleep at night. I'm having issues with these types of things, and so you take something to get to bed, whether you turn to alcohol, to over-the-counter medication, to drugs, and that's not painting us with a negative brush. It's, you know, we have challenges, we can't really figure them out on our own sometimes, and that's, you know, before we get help, that's kind of the first step usually. Yeah. So you can still function. I did for several years until I had what I call the wheels coming off my wagon incident, and that really, you know, and then I felt like I lost all control, and it was no longer possible simply to do those things. I needed help to be able to understand what was happening and how I could recover and live a healthy life again.
Wow. Well, and then for you to also make this movie, that had to have been another major step also to kind of revisit the whole issue again, I would imagine.
Absolutely. There's a challenge there in writing, you know, my own story for the movie. Was the hardest to write, and the other stories that I'm working on, we have the people already, I've done the interviews, so we're just seeking the funding to be able to make the film.
Yeah.
The other stories are not nearly as difficult to write. It's always more difficult to write about yourself, but at the same time it's cathartic, and that's one thing I would encourage veterans or anybody with post-traumatic stress is reach out for help and be able to talk about this, find the right person to talk with, because the more you talk, it's like a release valve. The more you get out, the better you're going to feel.
Dennis, briefly, where can people get An Epidemic of Distortions, a film you made?
Right now we are going through the funding campaign, so
Is it
on Kickstarter.
Kickstarter, okay, all right, and then we can follow it there, right?
Absolutely, they can go to redeployed.net/Kickstarter.
Okay, Dennis Davis, the producer and director of Epidemic of Distortion. Thank you.
Thank you.
And join us again.